Hi there, I'm your host, Mr. Doyle, and this is A Great Undertaking. The 1983 movie adaptation of Cujo isn't bad. In fact, the acting, score, and cinematography are pretty solid. The special effects are minimal but effective, and the namesake of the movie, Cujo the dog, is appropriately scary, intense, and coated in so much blood, mud, and slimy gore, it's straight up disgusting. But like so many King screen adaptations and one-off feature films in particular, while the film succeeds on many levels, it fails where it really counts. So I ordered a dog costume, but the shipping was delayed. I didn't have it for my last video either, but it still hasn't arrived. So I'm improvising again. And I've got this Beauty and the Beast mask, which kind of looks like a scary dog monster. So see how this works out. The fox one didn't go so well in the last video. It's stabbing me in the eyes. Why do they make masks like this? So I can't talk in this one either, because the mask just gets in my mouth when I talk and then it covers my eyes. Son of a... Compliments for Cujo. That beast mask is shedding. The acting in this movie is easily some of the best of the early King adaptations that I've watched in the last year. The actor who played Tad, Danny Pintaro, does such an incredible job that I'm convinced he must have legitimately thought that he was going to be mauled to death by a rabid dog. Like, this kid was 100% undoubtedly traumatized after shooting some of these scenes. And Dee Wallace nails the role as Donna Trenton. Wallace is Scream Queen royalty for a reason. She's a genuine powerhouse. The tension and hopelessness of the climactic situation feels authentic. The fast, sporadic edits and shaky camera shots effectively convey the chaos and desperation. The action hits hard, the gore and makeup effects are well done, and the score is intense and powerful. As I mentioned earlier, the majority of the cast and the film itself aren't bad. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it for the most part. But if the devil is in the details, there are no devils to be found in this movie. Criticisms for Cujo. In the movie version of Cujo, the focus is the conflict between Cujo and the protagonists, Donna and Tad. And that, for me, is the crux of the problem. When adapting a King novel to a feature-length film, screenwriters are essentially forced to cut out nearly every theme, every bit of subtext, all of the character building, the details of their complex relationships, and all of the nuance and dynamics in order to focus on a fragment of the story. Time and time again, important details are left on the cutting room floor for the sake of adhering to time constraints, and the resulting film never impacts the audience with the full force that the novel does. I hate to be that guy and insist that the cliche of the book was better is always the case, but in my experience, it almost always is. In the movie Cujo, the conflict between Cujo, Donna, and Tad begins at the halfway point of the film. And in the novel, it's at about the halfway point of the story that the conflict begins as well. The issue being, in the movie, the halfway point is approximately 45 minutes in, while it takes about 7 hours of reading to reach the halfway point of the book. So much is established in those hundreds of pages, the depth of the characters, the circumstances and consequences they are dealing with, their struggles and fears, desires, regrets, etc. We come to know them intimately, even Cujo the dog. We are given a powerful amount of insight as to who they are and what motivates and moves them forward, and as I discussed in my last video for the novel, we develop a deep, empathetic relationship with and to the characters King introduces us to. For example, in the book, we know that Donna is having an affair, and when she finally breaks off the fling and comes clean to her husband, Vic, she lays it all out there. She gives a painfully self-aware explanation, and while we may not relate to or accept her rationalization in regards to why she did what she did, we understand that her shame, her regret, and the circumstances that led her to be unfaithful in the first place were, at least in her own mind, valid emotional responses. In the movie, that conversation goes something like this. Her husband, after finding out what has been going on, simply says, "Yes or no?" And she just says, "Yes." And that's it. That's the entire conversation. Pages of exposition and vulnerability are boiled down to a single word. In the movie, I felt zero empathy for Dee. She's cheating on her husband, who is by all metrics a good man, a good father, and a good husband. She comes off as an unfaithful, unlikable, irredeemable cheater. No effort is made to make what she did seem reasonable or excusable or understandable. And this is the same issue I had with the movie adaptation of The Dead Zone. It's something I discussed in my video for that movie as well, but to sum it up, all the details and backstory and nuance of the novel's main antagonist, Greg Stilson, were omitted from the movie. He isn't the villain we need him to be to justify the actions of Johnny, the protagonist, and as a result, we don't sympathize or empathize with Johnny. In the movie, his actions and his response to the situation he finds himself in just feel unwarranted. Unless you've read the book and you have the foreknowledge of Stilson's past and Johnny's reasoning, it just doesn't work. You call the protagonist into question and hold them in contempt. It's not an ideal response to elicit from your audience in regards to the story's protagonist. Most King screen adaptations aren't good, actually. Over the course of the last year, I've watched 29 screen adaptations of King's work. Of the 29 adaptations, I have truly enjoyed maybe 8 or 9 of them. The majority missed the mark by a long shot. Some are relevant to King's story in name alone, and others are decent, but lack the impact of the original story due to the necessity of cutting away the bulk of the details in order to focus on 1 or 2 themes that are then tailored to fit into their respective mediums. The depth, dynamics, and impact that King painstakingly conveys are all too often sacrificed in the name of time constraints. One only has to look at the Dark Tower film as a shining example of just how unsatisfactory the results can be when hundreds, and in the case of The Dark Tower, thousands of pages are compressed into a screenplay that could never hope to do justice to the magnitude of the source material. It's just not possible. To be clear, there have been many King adaptations that have succeeded brilliantly in being, if not exactly faithful adaptations, worthy representations of the story or book they are based on. I'm not saying a screen adaptation has to be a word-for-word interpretation, and there's not necessarily a right way or wrong way to write a screenplay. Art is subjective after all, but when you sacrifice character development, our relationships to those characters, and remove the subtext, you're undoubtedly going to lose the desired impact. Dr. Sleep is a great example of a film that used the source material King provided as a basis for what could only be described as a masterclass in imagination and ingenuity. The film adaptation of Dr. Sleep was 2.5 hours long, which provided ample time to tell the story and to dig deeper into the themes of the novel. And of all 29 adaptations I've watched in the last year, Dr. Sleep was easily my favorite. It took its time and told the story in a way that was loyal to the themes and subject matter without being a strict retelling of the novel. Carrie is another excellent example. While the movie adaptation is certainly a more faithful retelling than Dr. Sleep, it allows us to feel deeply with Carrie and to empathize with her on a visceral level, which in turn provides us with all of the background and depth required to have a lasting impact. We pity Carrie, she has our sympathy, and our hearts. She's portrayed so effectively by Sissy Spacek and by the screenwriters that all of the emotions we are meant to endure hit so incredibly hard. In Dr. Sleep and Carrie, our relationships to the characters, our understanding of the nuance and relationships between the characters in the story, their uninhibited thoughts and struggles, the exploration of the recesses of their personalities and minds, these are the elements that cause us to be emotionally invested, to be held in the grip of terror, of shame, of pain, lust, fear, hopelessness. When we aren't given the opportunity to form these bonds and connections, the impact is never going to be as substantial, as poignant, or as devastating as King's writings. Final thoughts. If you haven't read Cujo or seen the movie, watch the movie first. It's not a bad movie. It's a fun thriller and packs a punch, but after that, read the book. I think you'll find both to be a much more enjoyable experience when done in that order. Had I not read the book immediately prior to watching the movie, I absolutely would have enjoyed the movie more. In fact, always watch the movie first if given the opportunity and when applicable. Sure, it might spoil part of the book, but just consider the book to be the uncut director's edition, you know? Alright, next week I'll be taking a look at the fourth Bachman book, The Running Man. The Running Man is a story of class solidarity and the controlling effects of the media as a tool of the ruling class, which influences popular opinion amongst the general public. It's a Bachman book, so naturally King substitutes monsters, vampires, and rabid demonic St. Bernards with some pretty heavy real-world topics. New videos drop on this channel every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard New videos drop on this channel every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so swap that subscriber bell with your knuckle biscuits to get notifications. And I'm sorry about that fly that keeps flying around. I hope it doesn't bother you as much as it bothers me. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty please with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.